So Ralph Metzner, who of course is one of the pioneers of the 1960s psychedelic revolution, along with Timothy Leary and with Ram Dass, then known as other name, Richard Albert, yes, and unlike Tim, Ralph never went to jail. He has amazing protective forces surrounding him, and they continue this day, I think, probably. Ram Dass, of course, hied off to India, and now is hiding in Hawaii. So you're the last one of the trio left in the continental United States, aren't you? Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. And Ralph is many things. I think all of you are familiar with his work and with his reputation. As I know a number of you have studied with him. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about him, but his interests have expanded far beyond just LSD, which was the original one, though Ralph was a psychologist before that, and still is a psychologist. But he also then discovered ayahuasca, yahe, in South America, something that I couldn't get Timothy Leary interested in back in the 60s. It was too early. But you've now really gone thoroughly into the subject and done a lot of work, and that's wonderful, and published on it. And one of his many interests has been mythology and relationship to Jung and many other things, but also in recent years he's been focusing on alchemy. And obviously, Ralph can talk about anything he likes, and he and I will engage in questions and answers, and I'll talk about shamanism, he'll talk about his work, and we generally hope to have a good time. So, Ralph, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I think we're both wired.
We're wired to the hilt.
So, could you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing just lately, if you would?
You
just came back from Switzerland, didn't you?
I came back from Switzerland from a conference in honor of Albert Hofmann's 100th birthday. So, alive, he's still alive. It's something to honor anyway, you know. But in addition, then it was in honoring of his discovery of LSD. Now it's working. Okay, so. Which was an amazing conference, and and it's amazing to be in his presence. But I think the sense that everybody got was it's somehow not quite. It's off and on, right?
Where's the transmitter?
So,
sorry about this.
That's okay.
This is Lou Judson, who doesn't miss any opportunity to get into the limelight.
Hello. Sorry. Okay. So. Anyway, there were like 2,000 people there. It was completely sold out, and there were many dignitaries from Basel and from Switzerland. The president of Switzerland sent his congratulations. And
so you can imagine George Bush doing the same thing.
Actually, there were 200 journalists and television and numerous documentaries being made, and it was like at the final closing thing, there was like a battery of flashing lights, and it was an amazing honoring and celebration of a man, and a very well organized conference and presentation by people from all over the world, 40 different countries, on research, on the spiritual aspects. One of the things that struck me the most was in what he says, and he speaks very clearly. He walks upright, he has a little, elbow support thing, but he walks upright, speaks in a completely firm, strong, determined, unwavering voice. I mean, it's awe-inspiring. And he used to, for the past decades, whenever I've heard him in public statements, he always emphasizes the need to do research, medical applications, and psychiatry, and so forth and so on. He still says that, but he now says most significant aspect of this experience that he had and that people can have with LSD and other psychedelics is that it's a spiritual, mystical vision.
And that's a big change for him.
Yeah, it's a change from him in terms of his outer presentation, but not in his inner beliefs. Clearly.
I see. He's going public. He's got tenure now.
Yes, yeah, you could say that. He says the most important thing is the coming together of the scientific worldview and the mystical, spiritual worldview. So.
And is it true that he's the patron saint of bicyclists?
Yes, well, there's that story of his legendary bicycle ride.
Yeah, I think everybody probably knows it, but
yes.
You don't read one of Ralph's books. Which book would mention that in it?
Well, actually...
I'm referring them to one of your books, whatever book.
I don't talk about it in one of my books, but the article that I shared with you, which will be published eventually on where I talk about the...
But anyway, he discovered LSD when he fell off his bicycle. He realized something was happening.
No, he was working in his laboratory and he absorbed some accidentally, so he thought afterwards. He began to feel very strange while he was working in his laboratory on ergot alkaloids, and he decided he needed to go home, and he was riding his bicycle home, and it seemed to him like a very long, 9,000-mile bicycle ride, and it was actually not that long, and then he lay down and he started having all these amazing visions, and
so he went back to the lab then and...
He thought in his mind that I must have absorbed something, which in itself is a strange thing for a Swiss chemist to do or to think, because they're meticulous in their lab procedures. And he went back and he tested chloroform, which is used in the thing, and that wasn't it because that's a narcotic. But then he thought, and I asked him about this, he thought it must have been something about this drug that I was working on, which was an extract of ergot, which is a grain, ergot grain, fungus that grows on grain. They call it mother grain in German, Mutterkorn, and because it's oxytocic, it produces uterine contractions, and it's used in childbirth, and he developed childbirth drugs for Sandoz, which are still sold and marketed.
And the happiest children in the world are born that way.
So what he says now, it's interesting. Ergot is interesting. You take the one form of ergot, and it helps childbirth. You take this other form, the derivative, and it helps spiritual rebirth. And there's a third form, which is a toxic poison. It makes people crazy. They used to have St. Vitus dance, in the Middle Ages. They had epidemics of ergot poisoning. The whole village would start having limbs get gangrenous. So it's very fascinating. I asked him once, how did you come to think that it was a drug? Did you know about other consciousness-altering drugs which existed, like mescaline was already known? And he said he didn't know that.
It's sort of surprising because Levine had written on the pharmacology of these things.
Right. But see, he was a very traditional, limited, conservative chemist. So he was like me as a graduate student in psychology. He's like very hidebound. So it didn't occur to him until after.
You just naively walked into Professor Leary's office, and that's the end of it.
Yes, and he says now LSD called to me because this is like, he would say, if he was here, he would understand what you mean with the spirit of the planet. He said LSD called, because he'd actually synthesized it 5 years before and was sitting on the lab. And the drug company had thought, it's not interesting. And then he said, something made me think maybe I should look at it again, so he synthesized it again. And I asked him, how did you get the idea that it must have been something that you absorbed and you took from a natural substance? And he said, because it reminded me of the vision I had as a child. I was a 9-year-old walking in the Alps and the meadows, where I had a mystical vision of being, at one with the natural world and feeling completely contained and held and accepted and safe and loved. And he said, this was the same place. So it must have been a natural substance. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So I have the highest regard for him. I think it's amazing what he did, what he stumbled upon. And he's very humble about it. Completely humble. He said, yes, I was sloppy lab techniques, which are very rare. And if it hadn't been that, I wouldn't have found it. You see.
Do you view him as a being of the tradition of alchemy, or accidentally or intentionally?
Yes, I think accidentally. I don't know that he knows anything about that tradition. And that was, what I've been working on recently. I only recently actually kind of saw the connection there between, for a long time I thought that alchemy and yoga are the Eastern and Western Western and Eastern sort of offshoots or extensions of shamanism. Shamanism going back to the old Stone Age, and then alchemy, and then all three of them are concerned with transformation of the individual at all levels. You know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychic, internally and with others. Therefore, all three of them are concerned with healing, and all three of them are concerned with spiritual development.
How would you define alchemy, just in a brief way, or describe it in your sense of it?
How would I describe it?
Or define it?
Define it? Well, it's, literally the word is alchemia, which is the Arabic word for the Egyptian art, the art of the black earth land. Egypt was called the black earth land, because it's referring to the fertile Nile when it overflows and the fertile earth. And so the art of the black earth land is alchemy. So it's a spiritual, holistic tradition of growth and development.
That word chemi, that's Greek, isn't it not?
No, it's Arabic.
I knew al was, but I thought the chemi was...
Alchemia, and so chemistry and all that.
Well, maybe there was Greek influence into Egypt, and then it may have come back again. I don't know. Yeah.
I think most people think it came from Egypt, and then, developed in the Hellenistic period. There was a tremendous flowering, and there's a figure that was kind of a semi-legendary human being called Hermes Trismegistus, who founded this tradition of transformation at all levels, so that it included the knowing how to work with materials. So Mircea Eliade said that alchemy comes from the shamanism of the metal workers and the miners and the smiths and the people that work with metal and fire, and they know fire and metal, and they're able to extract the metal, including precious metals and metals that can make weapons and tools and implements, as well as gold and other things, using fire, and that seemed like a magical art to the ordinary person. It is kind of a magical art.
What would you see as some parallels between shamanism and, maybe we could talk about shamanism and alchemy as you see it, and maybe some of the contrasts?
And with yoga, right. For a long time I sort of saw the conceptual and historical connection, but what I didn't see so clearly, I kept on looking, well, what's the equivalent of the shamanic journey, see, in the alchemical tradition, and I couldn't find that, and I don't think it's there, and I think I know the reason now, but what the key thing is, it's called a work, an opus, it's also called an art. The alchemical artists, they call it our art or our work, our opus, and there are these operations. And the operations are things like solutio and purificatio, they're all given Latin names, and coagulatio. They're like chemical processes. They've entered into, making a solution. This is something you do in chemistry. You turn a solid into a liquid. And or coagulatio is the opposite. You get something that's liquid and you coagulate it or congeal it together. And so I've come to following Jung. Jung interpreted that tradition, that work, as a symbolic way of describing psychological transformation processes, psychic transformation processes. He said this is a line